E mihi ana ki a tātou katoa, kua tūhono mai ki tēnei huitopa, i tēnei ata nei, ki ngā pūkenga, ki ngā tauira, ki ngā māreikura, ngā whatukura, ki ngā mātua tūpuna, ki ngā mokopuna, ki ngā ira atu a tēnā tātou katoa. E mihi ana ki a tātou katoa i roto i ngā ahuatanga o te wā o puanga, o Matariki, te tauhou Māori, e tuku whakaaro nui ana ki ngā mate tā rū nui, oki atu koutou ki tua o Pairau, ki tā uki ki tā wauwau ki te kāhui whetū, te huinga kahurangi ki reira, oti atu e hoki wairua mai, hoki tika mai, tēnā tātou. Ki ngā maunga whakahi, ki ngā hapu maha o te motu, ki ngā tangata tiriti, ko ai ake rānei, ka tima tātou hui ki te karakia, ka tākina ngā ahuatanga o tēnei huitopa. Nā reira kia hihiri mai tātou, nau mai e te ao awa te auhia mai tō hā ki tēnei mauri ora, hurihia te pōuri te pōhangu ki tua kei te tuhi, kei te rarama, hura mai te rā, ururu te moata tōtoro te pūhina tākiri te puata kai pōhira mai te haiata ki tēnei tauira, te ohonga o tēnei manawa ora, te aroake nei ki te tūrama rama te ai o nuku te pūtake take rongo, te hauangi e tai awhi o nei ngā koro putau ihu nui, o ihu roa, o tama ihu, ngongo hau tākiri ata ka ao ka watea. Nau mai e te ao, kawea mai ngā hua o tēnei rā, he whakamātau atu, he whakamātau mai, nau mai tau mai whakapūmautia, te hauoranga o tēnei hautū tangata i ngā tōpito runga, o raro o roto waho tēnei piringa, o te mauri matatū, o te ngākau oho o te hinengaro no waitua whakarere, tūpakari, rangahia i te uru pāroa tītokona kia eke atu ki taupainui, opi ki te ora, opi ki te kaha, opi ki te māramatanga, e rongo e, whakairihia. Nā reira ka pai tā tātou hui ki te karakia, te ahua nei kei te tai tōmuri wetahi, ki tēnei hui, ana ka pai tonu te mauri ka unoa mai rātou. Kei te tataria kia tahuri ki te kaupapa o te rā, ko te ki ka tū mai te tahi pikitia ki runga i te mata nei. Hoi anō. Nā reira, tēnā koe tāmoko, mo tō tūhono mai ki tō tātou hui, e te pūkenga, te rangatira, te toa, e kawe ana i ngā ahuatanga mo Te Taiao, koutou, ko tō whānau, e mihi anō hoki kia waimirirangi me tō koutou, mō toi kahotea. Nā reira, ka paipea kia tukuna te wā ki a koe, kia whakamohio mai koe kia tātou ko wai koe, no hea koutou mā, nā hea hoki o āhunga.
Pai tērā, tēnā koe e harino o tira tēnā tātou katoa. E mihi ana ki a koe mo e rā kupu a tāhua, e whakāhua nei i ngā kare aroto o te ngākau ki tēnei hononga ki Te Taiao. Ko ai tēnei, ko tehi haurua o te whānau, he hautoru me ki o tō tātou whānau e pāho atu i ngā rua wāhia, ki tōku taha nei me ki he pāpaka o rangataua, he kāwau o maniapoto, he taniwha o Waikato, he Mokopuna o tūranga waiwai marae, ko taupiri te maunga ko Waikato te awa, he hononga anō hoki ki tauranga moana ki te tāo tōku kuia. Ngai te rangi Ngāti Ranginui, ki te tāo tōku koroua, he hononga ki maniapoto, ko Ngāti Rora, ki te rohe pōtai. Kei konei hoki tōku whānau, ko Waimirirangi Ormsby, rāua ko hine reiuru kōpū i te ao. Waimirirangi he hononga ona ki Ngāti Wai ki te nota, ki Ngāti Tura, ki Te Arawa, ki Te Whānau Apanui, anō hoki ki Ngāti Mahuta ki konei. Ko mātou e whai ana I tēnei huarahi o Te Taiao, mā te kaupapa o pipiri kia Papatūānuku me ngā āhua, me ngā nekehanga o tērā kaupapa. Nā reira, koira mātou, e mihi ana ki te kaupapa, o tira ki te whānau, ki te hapori nei, te hapuririki nei o parakore, e kawe ana I ngā maru apo a tātou tūpuna ki te anamata. Nā reira, tēnā tātou.
Tēnā rawa atu koe. Ko tai mai te pānui ka au mai Jared hei a ko ake nei. Ki te kore tātou e mohi o ko waiau I runga I te pānui ko harina rina haru pāpera hau ko au te kaitiaki mo tēnei hui topa I tēnei wā, te tangata kōrero ko he maha oku hononga I te motu whānui, kei te arawa hau I tahu ana I ngāhi oku hapu me ngā huatanga Taiao. He hononga pūmau ki te maunga titohea. Ki taupiri ki ngā hau e whā me ki. Ko etahi tikanga mo tēnei hui ina he pātai tau, whakamohio atu ki roto I te... aroha atu. Just realised maybe not everyone speaks Māori. Nā reira, aroha. If you have, so there are some tikanga for this hui. Welcome everybody. Nau mai haere mai. I am our MC for this hui. And if you have any pātai, you can raise your hand, although maybe you won't be seen. So just pop it in the chat and submit there. You will be placed on mute by our tech team. And ko te whakaute, so if your mic happens to pop off mute while other people are speaking, just be respectful of the kai kōrero of the time. You might have to mute yourself. Aroha anō hoki mo te wā. We don't have the time to go all around, which what I would love to do for us to all introduce ourselves. So hopefully you just immerse into the kōrero and the knowledge from the pūkenga that we have been so blessed to join our hui and share with us. And hākua kua ake nei te āhua. E te tātari tonu tātou ki? Aroha atu, I don't want to keep the people who are already in here waiting, and if we have late comers, then they're welcome to join in to the kaupapa by then. Nā reira, ko te kaupapa o tēnei wāhanga ko Popoiā te kākano, so our theme of this wānanga is Popoiā te kākano, and we have been, well, he hono renui kua tai mai a tā moko te whāngai mai ngā kōrero ki a tātou, me tōna whānau anō hoki. So we have Tāmoko Ormsby, and he will be sharing his knowledge and life experiences with us. Nā reira Tāmoko, ko te pātai tuatahi, what does caring and maintaining the mana and mauri of Papatūānuku look like to you and your whānau?
Tēnā koe Harina. I'm just looking through all everyone's names, like seeing, these people, no, like, and Te Kawiti there, Te Rua, Jackie, even Paul, like, everyone here's probably has their own interpretation of it and the way they go about it. So I think moku ake, ko te mea ahua whakarere ana I o tātou whakautu ki tēnei pātai is how you link to your, to your taiao, I suppose. And mō tātou, o pipiri kia Papatūānuku, it really comes from our hononga to our awa. And I think koira te pau o tō tātou kaupapa, o tō mātou kaupapa o pipiri kia Papatūānuku I tīmata mai te whakaaro. E ma te haere ana te mauri o tō tātou awa, he hai pēnei ai, nā ka ata whirawhira I ngā whakaaro me ngā mahinga o tātou tangata nei. Kātahi ka kite I ngā raru. So yeah, we were, because of our hononga to our awa, and kind of the declining health of our awa, we started inquiring about why it's like that. And that's probably the one thing we share is we've realized the impacts of agriculture on our awa, and then also our role as consumers in that. So ki tō pātai around how do we contribute to the mauri and the mana of our awa. I think we take it on as a personal responsibility in the way we carry ourselves, the things that we educate ourselves with, and then the actions we take. And koira, that's kind of what shaped our kaupapa in the first few years. But we've come a bit, there's a few realizations that we've had with that, but I suppose I'll dive into that later on, just around. Yeah, so I think for us, mātou pepeha koe arahi, o koina mō mātou o konei, ko te pepeha tēnei arahi ānei a mātou, ko te awa, ko te maunga, ko waiora, me o pāngaki e rā tūpuna.
Ai, ka tika ho te pepeha. Rawe hoki. Sorry. Nā reira, I roto I te rāhua, can you please share with us any mahi whakaaro you have around building systematic change within the space, so within our responsibilities too?
So yeah, hei tāpiri atu ki e rā kōrero, and I suppose it started as an individual kind of commitment that we made to our awa and what things we can do to improve our awa, the mana and the mauri of our awa. But then we kind of realized that there's only so much you can do as an individual. There's only so much, the cost to do things, the convenience of changing your lifestyle, and I think the context of of different whānau across the motu, we can't expect everyone as individuals to kind of carry that burden, that responsibility. E nei haipapa. So we were lucky to do some mahi with MFE in the waste strategy with Jackie, and have wānanga around what does systemic change look like, and start that kōrero. And that was a good learning experience for us. Jackie's probably smiling, a few people probably smiling. Engari, I think we learnt of the different whakaaro, I think he whakaaro Māori, and the way we see the world, and the way you kind of the way you approach solutions and change is very different to e rātu, and there's probably things we all know. And so instead of looking at the individual aspects around cost, convenience and context, we have to change the discussion to a system change around consumerism, capitalism and colonialism, and it's all that e rā momo whakaaro. And what does that look like? So for us, it looked like, how do we in the first instance, it looked like, how do we talk to government to change? And that didn't work. Long story short, so it looks like, how do we come together a iwi, a hapori a whānau, and collectivise, so that we have a united voice around what do we want as Tiwi Māori, and what do we think is an unmutable set of actions. So that's kind of at a system change. One action is how do we come together, pēnei nā, and then how do we use this momentum. And then I think another thing that we're shifting towards at a local level, which would have been cool for Jared to talk about, is around our local resilience, our infrastructure, our kai se pēraki o mahi e harina, te whakatupu kumara. Really, it's that food sovereignty conversation, and a lot of whānau in this chat is all about that. So how do we, after COVID, after learning the fragility of the global system, how do we build community resilience through kai? So yeah, that's kind of the other local level is, for us, that wānanga we're having is how do we create a community mara, a whānau mara, like a lot of people here to kind of build that resilience. So when everything falls to, when everything starts to, when the system starts to be tested, usually we're the first one to be the brunt of it, our communities. So how can we create that infrastructure, that community infrastructure, and put it in place? Yeah, so koira he te whakaaro ai.
How do we? So not really focusing on the challenges, but what are some of the strengths-based actions that you might be able to advise on how do we
I'm just gonna be like, I'll just fangirl Jared and them at the moment. They do onuku, and I think that's a syntropic agroforestry system that they're modeling it off. So it's moving away from monoculture, orchard type of things with that high intensity fertilizer. Like the cost of fertilizer skyrocketed. I think I was on like the permaculture page, and it was like the cost of fertilizer is going up. So the cost for commercially, industrially grown, heavy intensity kai will go up, and it'll be more susceptible to our climate change. So things like syntropic agroforestry that I'm like just learning about and want to do here are ways to build resilience in your system, long-term intergenerational kind of mahi. So Jared can speak to that when he gets here. Then, and also like instead of, we have like I'm inspired by the mahi that Jackie's done and all the whānau at like extreme zero waste, building their community, starting from a community compost, to then bring whānau around these discussions around waste. And we all know they got their resource recovery facility there, and then all the movement that come from that. So for us, how do we how do you just take that model? Because if we don't, so that's what we want to do, community compost, and then that links to a community mara, and then community mara links to community kai, and then you start to build these cycles, these local cycles. Because if we don't, then some rich as big industrial is going to just do it and then get all money, and then we're still going to be not as resilient as communities. So yeah, for me, really around kai, like I think that's probably the most immediate thing that we can engage with is kai. The harder things to change is like plastic, like, because that comes from overseas. There's all the stuff around it. People in here probably know a lot about that kōrero, but those are kind of the bigger system change discussions that need to happen. And I think we just need a bigger stick as Māori to whack people with, and what that looks like, I'm not too sure.
Oh, tēnā koe. Okay, but it was what was that? Agroforestry?
Yeah, like
Oh, Jared is here.
So yo, Jared! Me kōrero koe.
The word that you said.
Syntropic agroforestry. I've been following them in the whānau. There's a permadynamics, but then there's also mahi that like you got the mahi they're doing in Taranaki around they're creating the organics cycle, the food waste cycle. There's just I can just see Te Kawiti writing paratangata, like entering the discussion around human and human waste composting, especially for rural, or for us, we live in our tiny house, so we want to have that mobility. I think it's just having these different just a different approach. We can't do the same things. So
me,
yeah, and also so I think one thing is the learning. So learning and wānanga like this, we can learn about everything that's going on. That's pumping and inspiration. But yeah, Jared.
Incredible. Oh, thank you so much for all of that. Very high level. A lot for us to kind of gauge. Is nā reira, te ahua nei ko taimai a Jared. E te rangatira, tēnā koe.
Tēnā tātou. Tatahi, me tuka kumihi kia tātou e huhui mai nei, me aku papāha, ko tai tō muri mai ahau. Koe ra te ahua o tēnei wā, ko te māwiwi e pā mai te whānau, so kei te tō muri te haere, menari kei te ora. And tino he waimari e tēnei ki te kuhu mai ki tō koutou taha. So yeah, just wanted to give a big mihi and shout out to everyone. Tā moko, harina, all the parakore crew, the very Kaupapa in the background dropping us some comments, and just so cool to be here and cool to dive in straight in with talking about Mara and all the different ways of growing clay that are emerging and that we're moving back into, and yeah, just awesome. So yeah, maybe I'll just jump in off of what the bro Tamoko was mentioning about syntropic agroforestry. Yeah, so I think first and foremost, just important just to lay out that there's so many beautiful ways of growing clay. You know, there's permaculture, there's Mara, Māori, there's food forest gardening, agroforestry, there's conventional agriculture. There's just so many ways of growing clay, and I love it all. And I think there's beautiful things to take from all of these areas, and there's some things that need to be left behind as we move into the future with the new challenges. And so we practice a way of growing clay that really leans into observing the Taiao, observing it, sort of gaining our mātauranga from the cycles that occur in the Taiao, and then bringing those kukume mai wera mātauranga kei te tui tō mātau mai, so bringing that into our practice. How does the Taiao, you know, what are the processes that it follows? How does the Taiao express its identity, and how can we incorporate that into what we're doing? And so one way we do that is by you know, planting a lot of density, a lot of planting material, and a lot of diversity, because if you go into the Ngāhere, you'll see so many different plants. They're just everywhere. It's so packed, and it's dense. And the Ngāhere has a way of just naturally organizing itself in a way that's harmonious, it's abundant, and it's resilient. And no one's watering it, no one's putting fertilizer, weeding it, it just is. And it's full of mauri. And so if a Ngāhere can do that, if Tāne Mahuta and Papatūānuku and all the atua can you know, collaborate in a way that just creates this most ultimate, beautiful forest, surely my little peanutty can take some of those learnings and incorporate it into what we're doing at home, using fruit trees and all our Māori and other exotic trees. But just to quickly summarize sort of, I guess, some of the techniques we use in syntropic agroforestry is there's a lot of non-native plants involved. And the beauty of that, we use non-natives and natives, fruit trees, medicinal plants, but we use those non-native trees, the exotic trees, to do the hard work in the early stages, because a lot of them grow really fast. They put roots down into the soil really quickly, break up the soil, bring life in, and the biomass that grows on these rako and these plants, we then bring back down to the whenua, place all of that biomass around our fruit trees and our rongoa, and that's it's like growing your own fertilizer in situ while stimulating life and putting more roots in the ground. And these exotic plants, a lot of them are just playing a temporary role in time, and maybe in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we'll be phasing them out, and then our more long-term fruit trees, rongoa, and long-term trees will then come up and create a canopy and basically start shading out those pioneer species, those species that it's their job to do the hard work at the start. And then we, they phase out, and then we move into the more mature stages of our food forest. But I'll just stop there. Yeah.
E hoa aroha atu, tira pia kāre te katoa e mohe ana ki a koe, ano hoki kāre te katoa e kōrero Māori ana. Engari, thank you for arriving. Better late than never. And if you could just share a bit about who you are, where you come from, because I think maybe there are some people who don't actually know who you are, even though you're so famous.
Nā, whakaro pai tērā, yeah, tōtika hau ki te kaupapa. But I just got a bit excited there as Tamariki was talking about, some things I'm passionate about, and I just dived in. But ka tika me whakamohio atu ko wai hau, so he uri tēnei no waimana, mauna pohatu te mauna, taurana te awa, mātātua te waka, tūhoi te iwi, taunui te marae ko Jared here ki tā hau. So I'm from Waimana, small rural settlement at the northern edge of the Urewera National Park, beautiful forest that is one of it's a forest that's really still intact, and it's still has never been heavily milled of a lot of its big native trees. So it's a beautiful, mature, ancient forest that's great for anyone to go and see, and I'm lucky to have been brought up next to it. But tēnei wā, kei te noho a hau ki Hokianga, ki te Nota. So I live in the Whānau now, with my wahine and her whānau. And we're really lucky to be living in a tiny house that we built on our homestead that we created and are still creating. Started out with a paddock, and pretty much through that whole journey, making the driveway, digging the drains, just the whole process, we've pretty much gone through it ourselves and self-created that with no prior experience, really, just learning on the go. So we're in a space now where we're living in our home, and we're really just getting into creating our food forests, and a lot of planting, mara, but we're very much at the early stages. And what I'm passionate about is sharing these kaupapa about growing kai, and sustainability, restorative living, regenerative farming, and all of that. I'm passionate about all those things, and just wanting to share that with the wider community, and we do that through our organisation, which is called Ōnuku. Whānau. So that's a quick introduction from me.
Ōnuku, ere huake nei, tēnā koe te waimana kāku, maunga pohatu. Me o piringa maha anō hoki. That lovely. You can feel the Māori in that. That's and it touches on what Tamariko's already been sharing about being guided, personal responsibility with te pepe ha, te ha o te pepe, o tātou awa, and changing our lifestyles to suit and live that life. And thank you so much for sharing a lot about that other space. I can't even pronounce the first word properly, and hopefully I think a lot of us would need a bit of a potama step up into that world of knowledge. But if we could, this question is for both of you, and we'll go back to Tamariki and come back to you again. If you can share with us any mahi or whakaaro you have around building systematic change within the space. So we've kind of been talking about that, but this space being te akina te Māori o tō tātou Te Taiao, Papatūānuku, o tō tātou whānau, te rā momo, whakaaro. Moko?
Just what Jared's doing now. I'm just buzzing out. I think there's a lot of strength in our mātauranga, and I like and like permaculture. I've seen permaculture developed in the 70s, I think, by two Pākehā fellas in Tasmania. But then I think the kōrero there was that they observed a lot of the things that the Aboriginal ngā iwi takitake ā rātou momo āhuatanga. So it was based a lot of what the Aboriginal people did in their relationship to the Taiao. And I think a lot of these practices have roots in mātauranga taketake that resonate with us. So I think it's my first thing was like, hey, who the Pākehā that did this? But then really they based it on our indigenous whakaaro. So I think leaning back to that whakaaro. But I think I'll just pass it to Jared because I was yarning for ages and I'm just keen to hear his kōrero and being a practitioner in that space. And I think that's one space we want to move to being practitioners, and yeah.
Ka pai. Kia koe anō, Jared?
So we're talking about like how do we think systematic change can occur?
Systematic change, building systematic change. So it is what touching.
Yeah, so I guess if we're talking about systematic change, then we're talking at a wider level, like a more like how do we make systematic change at a regional, national level that's affecting the entities that kind of lay out the guidelines for society to live within, and that's a tricky one. I think that there's there's that whole coming from the policy angle side of things, where if we can get our governments and our councils and corporations to implement policy that has us that can create sweeping changes across our communities and regions, then we're on the way. But then it's how do we get a government, and then how do we get councillors who are going to represent their kaupapa when everyone's sort of playing the game of the popularity game of just trying to get voted in. So I think like the whole, in terms of creating systematic change that is actually going to influence what is needed to move our society in the right direction. That's big, and that to me, the systems within which that we're operating make it hard for that to happen. So what I like to focus on is just what I can do personally, and how can I unplug from all of the systems that are harming, that are destructive to our Taiao. So that's the journey that I've been on, is kind of starting to become aware. What are the systems that, just by being born into this world, what are the systems that I'm participating in that are harming, that are destructive to the Taiao? And so just some of the simple ones off the top of my head, it's like using fossil fuels. So one way that we're moving in the right direction with that is moving more towards electric powered things. So we're off-grid, solar powered. We have an electric car. All of my tools are nearly all electric. My chainsaw, my mower. So straight away, just by that's one thing where I've taken out a lot of fossil fuels, a lot of carbon emissions have just been taken out of the equation. Now, I'm not saying that that's the answer and that I'm like, this is what everyone should be doing, because there's still a lot of extraction that happens in the process of, getting lithium for the batteries and iron ore for all of the steel. And so it's not the answer, but I think it's a step in the right direction. So there's that. Even things like in building a home. Here's another example. Building a home, how can I have less of a negative impact on the Taiao by building a home? Because nearly all the homes in New Zealand are built with pine. A lot of that wood is it's treated with copper, chromium, and arsenic. And then it's grown on someone else's whenua, and there's just a crazy amount of carbon emissions in the process of extracting that wood. The destruction on the land itself that happens is a whole nother story. So there's another, like, man, what can I do about that? Where can I buy some timber to build my house? So one thing that I'm starting to practice now and think about more is what trees can I plant that my son and maybe my grandkids and their kids, I'm going to plant timber trees so that they can build their own homes with timber that we grow. So it's one thing to plant the trees, but then how do you use them? How do you use a big giant tree that's just sitting there? So I'm having to learn that. I've been building things with some trees that my partner's parents planted about 24 years ago, some gum trees, and I'm building with those now. And that's been a mega learning experience. But look, I guess I'll just kind of leave it at, but I just wanted to sort of show it's like, hey, identify what's something that I'm doing in my life that's harming the Taiao, that is detrimental to Papatūānuku. What's an alternative that I can do that's going to be regenerative of instead?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm actually feeling that inspiration. And amazing too, your whānau or your in-laws have, started that generational change for your tamaiti, their Mokopuna. And I actually, I've been working with hapu or iwi about in this sense, but I never thought to do it my own self, which is simple. Definitely tautoko the policy and the government change. Thank you. You've shared so much insight. Hopefully everyone is letting that marinate inside our minds and souls. You've kind of answered the next question as well, but we did have a part-time come through from Holly, and she's seen that Pipiriki Papatūānuku are moving more towards system change rather than individual action. So she's keen to hear more about this move, please, Tāmoko.
Tēnā koe, Holly. So the move came from, like I kind of framed up at the start, our main driver for PKP was our river, and the way that we chose to minimize impact on the river was, like what Jared said, not participating in the system that supports the degradation of our awa, and that was by refraining from having any meat and dairy that's grown, that's farmed industrially in Aotearoa. So that was kind of our way to take ourselves out of that system that impacted our awa, and that's kind of what we encouraged whānau to do. Like, you know what? If we all don't eat meat and dairy, then we're not contributing to that system. But then I learned like 90% of the dairy products in Aotearoa are like exported overseas, and I'm like, damn, we're just a drop in the ocean. So even if we all changed, like Te Iwi Māori changed, just in our individual capacities, that's not going to be enough. So I feel like we misrepresented the problem and the solution that we put forward. And then so the second thing was, how do we then have to engage with these system level discussions? And I heard at a hui last week that I saw Harina, the te mana o te wai and the kōrero that's done around that, which I'm learning, that stops the development of 2 farms down south. So there's more of that kind of level mahi that needs to happen. And like what Jared said around, we can transition to electric. And I was like, a few years back, I was like, man, I want an electric car. Like, I want to get a cyber truck, which, could tow my tiny house and all of these cool things. But man, when you realize lithium comes from, Bolivia and indigenous people getting rolled there, and then cobalt, slave labor, and then who owns it? Elon Musk. So it just feeds into that capitalist. One person gets rich, everyone gets poor, but that's the system we're a part of. So I think being really critical of our assumptions that our individual action is enough. I had a whakaro about this, and I'll ramble a bit, but I've been reading this fella, Franz Fanon, in mahi that Linda Tuhiwai Smith does, and they talk about movement and resistance. And it makes me think of Te Reo Māori. We can all speak Te Reo Māori, if we think back in the 70s, 80s, when Ngā Tamatoa and the movement for Te Reo Māori happened, there was probably whānau who spoke Māori in their homes already at that time, and they instilled Te Reo Māori through their whānau, but then there were a lot who didn't. And then those people who came together and went at a system approach and protested and said, here's our big stick and here's the people and this is what we want, then Te Reo Māori could become normalised across all. So I think moving away from the individual, because the individual is, I'll speak Māori in my own house, in a context, in a 70s, 80s context where it's not a widespread thing. Whereas a system approach needs to be, how can we come together and push, not just as Māori, but as tangata tiriti, tangata Māori, and then as tangata take globally. So it's there, it's like being critical of how we go about it. So koira anui, well, that's kind of what our, and the carbon, everyone knows the fact, carbon, 71% emissions, 10 companies. So I was like, damn, I can try and take every bit of carbon out of my life, and then Jeff Bezos flies a rocket, and then, that's enough carbon for like all of New Zealand, or, just those whakaro. So there, tēnā koe, Holly.
Tēnā koe, tēnā whakautu. I totally understand that. I've come through those learnings too, and then you realise what's really going on. But I do think that even one person in the change that we make does make a huge difference, especially for our whenua. And so ka mihi au ki a koutou, ki tō whānau, ki a koutou anō, ki Jared. Because that lifestyle change, I think, is what we need, and especially to reconnect our whānau back to their pepeha and to their whenua. Mindful that not everyone has the opportunity. It's beautiful to hear the story and the way of doing things. What, I have another part I hear. What future do you want to see for your Tamariki and Mokopuna? Kia koe, Jared?
What future do I want to see for my Tamariki and my Mokopuna? I want them to live on a whenua that is abundant, that provides all their needs, that requires them to not have to go far for what they need, in terms of kai, timber, shelter, warmth, aroha, all of that. So that's my aspiration for my Tamariki and my Mokopuna. And I guess I see that I'm just a sort of like I'm what we're doing is I have my hopes and my aspirations. I want to live carbon negative. I want everything that I do, my life, my mahi, to be replenishing of the environment. And it's a big ask in today's world, and I don't know if I'll actually achieve that in my life, but but I'll get a part of the way there and set up a tuapapa platform for them to then carry on with that, whether they choose to or not. Yeah, but no, that's for me. It's as simple as that. The whenua that most of the whenua in Aotearoa now is quite degraded, and so my only hope is that we can do a lot of mahi to restore that, because there's this beautiful saying, we don't inherit the world from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. I love that. It's and then there's this other one that I put with it, which says, so we don't inherit the world from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And someone once said that the rent we pay for our place here on earth is service to others. Now, if that's true, then service to the earth itself is the rent we pay for our children's place here on earth. And so for me, that's a kaupapa that I try to embody.
Mean, bro.
Awe, ai whakaro au ki te paukai ka tai anō ka oti ana, tētai o ngā kōrero mō kingi koroki. If it's good for the people, hēnā e pai mo te tangata mahia. Are pēra oki ki ngā kupua kui te puea ne, mahia te mahi he, e ara i te mahi noa, he mahi mō te katoa. E whakaro pai ki ngā mea katoa, he mahi tika. And yeah, the rent we pay for time on earth is service to others. Lovely. Kia hawa no hoki o wawata, tāmoko?
Yeah, mainly my one's around kai. Like, I love kinners. I love crayfish. I'm from Waikato, where our rivers have got rolled. So I'm not a coastie. And some coasties don't like kinners. I'm like, privileged now. So I think for me, and recently too, like this is, we're doing our hautapu, just a little whānau one, our umukohukohu. But I'm going through what freshwater? They're like, kewai. I'm like, damn, we don't have this. And then the others is like in just my immediate context, tuna. I'm like, I've got to learn. My koro was a tuna man. I've got to relearn all that whakaro. And so we and the last one on the list was like, all salmon. So I was like, oh, damn, I've got to go to the New World and get a salmon. So so my future is that my future is that I hope my Tamariki in Mokopuna can do their umukohukohu every matariki that has kai from the whenua, from our locality, from our immediate vicinity, and that comes with a lot of things. Like I think of kina, I think of ocean acidification, climate change. I think of freshwater crayfish. I think of how do we move away from industrial agriculture. I think of titi, I think of minkinas from down south. But so it's hononga iwi a hapu, and bringing our hononga together. So it's really, and then through that mahi as well, it not forces you, but it places you in a context where you are uniquely linked to your taiao, your maunga, your awa. And so that's really what I want from my kōtiro and for our mokopuna, is so that they can have that opportunity to rebuild our hononga, to our taiao. Because at the moment we're in a, where our Pakeke gen were fighting for te reo Māori, that they didn't have it, but they knew that they wanted it for their kids. And so that's kind of thing. I feel like we don't have this at the moment, but it's something we can create. And our legacy that, Māori have a legacy of coming together and resisting and creating change, and that being intergenerational. So koera ngā whakaro.
Yeah, tika hoki. The motion of things and the generational change and clearings that as generations come, We have new, well, not new, but like a continuum of a mission. So as being kura kaupapa Māori aho matua kids, we've been blessed and nurtured in a space that our parents fought for, or that our tupuna fought for. And we're coming beyond the just being able to learn in our language, but now we have to share the language and then move more into cultural practices, Because I totally agree. The kaupapa of the kōrero came up about what we need in the mukohukohu, and it's kind of like, well, actually we do need to know about these things and about the kai that we're thanking for and giving to into the mukohukohu. And you've just given me an awesome inspiration to try and organise a mukohukohu where practitioners, that maybe we can collaborate when everyone brings the knowledge and the kai to the same place. Tērā pēā, tērā tau. We've got some questions coming in here from Thea. Do you think exposing teaching non-Māori about Te Ao Māori is important for building collective action towards systematic change and more regenerative lifestyles? If so, what are some support Māori need to make this happen? It kind of touches on the permaculture kōrero, how you were saying it is Indigenous Pāmoko. So we'll flick over to you, Jared. Do you think exposing teaching non-Māori about Te Ao Māori is important for building collective action?
I definitely think so. And I think it works both ways. So for instance, permaculture has a lot of beautiful offerings, some of which are lended from Indigenous philosophies. Permaculture language does not resonate strongly with Māori, just because of the terminology, the words they use. It kind of just flies over the average person's head when they start talking about chop and drop and diversity and succession, and just like, what are you even talking about? But there is some beautiful things and practices, techniques within permaculture. So permaculture needs to learn how to speak to Māori or Indigenous people. That's what I'm passionate about, and me and Kawati and Ōnuku, part of our Kaupapas, is making a lot of these ideas more just graspable, more attainable for Māori, so that we too can benefit from the awesomeness of permaculture. And in the same way, in reverse, I believe as well that Te Ao Pākehā has a lot to gain from engaging with, connecting with Te Ao Māori, tikanga Māori, mātauranga Māori, especially in terms of the deep, meaningful and real connection that we have to our Taiao through whakapapa. We descend from the Taiao itself. So we have this strong connection to it. And that's one thing I found when I was working with Parakore was, it's easy to ignite action within Māori around the Taiao, because you just start, you say, do it for Papatūānuku, do it for tāne mahuta. And Māori connect with that straight away. And even though they might not be passionate about recycling, you can tap into that inspiration a lot quicker than someone who has just no connection with the Taiao. So that's the area that I really feel that one of the areas anyway that Te Ao Pākehā can really benefit from Indigenous thinking, and just really just have a meaningful connection to our Taiao, a feeling that they're a part of something much greater. And that's, yes, we are individuals, but and as mankind, we make up a formidable portion of the Earth's identity, but by no means do we define it. And the more that we lose touch with that connection, then the faster we'll meet our peril. So I'll just katu ki reira.
Pēnā koe hoa. Ki aha koe tāmoko, ki aha o whakaro?
No, just tautoko i ngā kōrero a Jared. We had a cool opportunity when mahi with Jackie. We were to provide I suppose a mātauranga or Māori lens of what does and a mahi with the waste strategy. And even though it didn't get taken through by government, we work with a wider rōpū, the wider advisory rōpū of non-Māori, of tangata tiriti, and they were really inspired. You know, kind of people were saying, I forgot why I did what I do in terms of, you know, they were working in a recycling agency, but it kind of, yeah, like what Jared said, it gives people purpose, and it kind of re-centers them and grounds them to something bigger. And even the fella from like waste management, I think they were like, how can we move forward? They were like, oh, we already had a good kōrero with the pūrākau that was used to bring everyone together. So it was promising to see that different people, non-Māori, were inspired by our mātauranga. But then I was like, then I got a pātai from one of them. He goes, I can't wait till the day I'm Māori. And I was like, ooh, there's a fine line there. But so I was like, so if it is, you know, you want to share this inspiration, but you know, tangata whenua, tangata tiriti, there's a fine line we have to dance, because then you get on the lines of appropriation of our knowledge, and then everyone's Māori if you're from New Zealand, and all those kind of tricky conversations. So there is, but we have to kind of tread carefully and acknowledge our roles, I think. But yeah.
Tēnā koe, tika, tangata whenua, tangata tiriti. And I do think it's important though that we also understand today, a lot of us are mixed blood, and a lot of us have Pākehā heritage, myself included. And it is something to be proud of, but I think it's more about the spiritual and mindfulness of our people, and the knowledge as well, eh? And appreciating in different spaces, there are different attitudes and ways of understanding our knowledge. So I tautoko you there, Jared, it's he tirohanga Māori, he tirohanga Taiao, he hohonu, he rereke ki te tirohanga o te Pākehā, o te, I roto I te tikanga Pākehā, engari, I think there are caring Pākehā, and I work with a lot actually, not about me, but just a tautoko, some of our Pākehā whānau that with collective action, you know, it's a mindset, and yeah, ka waiho ki reira. Thank you for sharing your whakaro on that, in that space. Definitely needs to be recentered in purpose. And that's how amazing Māori is. Because, of course, people want to be Māori because he tino miharo te ao o ngā tūpuna. I'm just reading through another pātai we have here from Holly. And it is, there's so much demolition waste that goes to landfill from whare being torn down to make way for new stuff. How can we make use of these amazing resources? Like, love the practice of intergenerational planning. Oh, that was your comment. So, you know, you've shared how you are ensuring that process of a circular way of living and generational change, Jared. And Tāmoko, but do you guys have any whakaro about how we can repurpose the waste from whare and buildings that are being demolished? Jared?
Yeah, I'm just scratching, trying to think like what are some further ways that we can really make the most of the resources that are being wasted. Because yeah, it's tricky, I suppose. Like it might just, I mean, I don't have any like flash answers that I can just like throw out there, but from my experience in acquiring a little bit of repurposed materials and whatnot, I guess the only thing I can say is that it's just by getting out there and asking, you know, if there's a building site and they're demoing a house and you see materials that are there that look good enough for you to use for something, then I think maybe it just takes being a bit brave and just going home like, Kazi, can I get some of the stuff here that's going to go on the tip? And yeah, so there's that way. There's just like asking around. It's amazing what people have hiding away in their garages, and yeah, so yeah, just worth putting it out there, worth asking. There's demolition places everyone knows about. You know, they're like big warehouses where they just have thousands and thousands of windows and doors and timber and all these things. And what I find is that they're really expensive, which is quite disheartening. But you know what, actually, trade me is a pretty good place to go if you want to find repurposed materials for cheap. There's a lot of stuff on trade that's still expensive, but you can pick up some really cheap things. Like here's an example. When we were building our tiny house, I bought a set of, I think it was about 15 windows for $27. 15 windows and doors for $27. And that's, we're still using those now, and we've built a tiny house, a shed. My father-in-law licked a couple of the windows. So yeah, just having a look out there. I wish there was a better system in place that salvaged materials, but I just yeah, don't know if there is at the moment.
Tēnā koe. Tamako, whakaaro?
I don't know how to build anything. I have a different set of skills. We live in a tiny house, but I have no contribution to its construction. So I just, what the bro Jared said, I know that's a new industry though, deconstruction. That's just starting. There's a ropu in Tamariki called Trowel, I think, Te Taiao Waikato, but they're involved in that space, and I think it'll be a more of a, well, it has to be, because with the price of building materials going up and all that stuff you see in the news and the jib board and all the shortages, we have to look into it. But I think it's hard. Repurposing would be hard, and I think regulation of new building materials and transition, like what Jared said around how can we transition to better building materials. Yeah, but just off the corridor, that's already been shared.
Yeah, I think actually the true answer to the question is stop, like as a society we have to just stop investing in things that don't last long, and we have to move into ways of doing things and building things where it's going to last for multiple generations, for hundreds of years. And that's you know, like, I mean, it's easy for me to keep going like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just an individual, and I've got agency, and I've got some privilege going on that's allowing me to do it. But I guess just wherever possible, yeah, we should be just trying to make those choices for things that are going to last, that are going to go through the test of time, and just keep working and keep working. But as we know, our world isn't like that today, so we've got to be go against the grain and stand up and you know, put our actions where our values are.
Hi, Nami, we're actually coming to a close, so I just want to ask both of you, or give time to both of you if you have any closing comments.
I'll jump in real quick and just want to mahi to Harina, beautiful mahi. I always see your posts doing kumara, and that makes my heart sing, seeing you in those big paddocks doing the kumara. So massive, keep it up, yeah. Every time I see it, I think, man, it'd be great to come and be a part of that sometime. And Tamako, it's just so beautiful to hear you kōrero, bro, and just hear your knowledge spilling out of your kōrero, and so cool to share the screen with them, bro, and really look forward to catching up in person sometime. Final kōrero, I think one of the kind of taglines for this panel was around how do we more naturally connect our rangatahi, our tamariki with the Taiao, and yeah, because I guess that's where it all begins in terms of like fostering environmental values within our people in childhood. So yeah, like I think taking our kids out into the ngahere as much as possible is a big one. And I know a lot of people live in suburbs and stuff like that. Go to a park, put some wonder into your children around the trees that do exist. Climb some trees. Oh yeah, that's a good place to go. Climb some trees. Love climbing trees. Love sending my son up trees. And yeah, just make it natural. So just want to leave it there, and mihi to everyone for being a part of this. Kia ora.
Kia ora e hoa. Yeah, tautoko ana I ngā mihi ana ki aku e harina, te kau I tēnei kaupapa o tira, te tira e āta noho nei. I'm just like, I would be keen to hear from everyone else, but I know this is not the format for it. But my last thing is there's so many amazing kaupapa that are going on that we're all involved in, and I think there's a strength in this kind of movement. It's like just not low key, but it is happening. There's a lot of inspirational things happening, like what what you're doing, Jared, or Kawati's doing, or Te Rua's up to, or Harina yourself, and everyone's doing. So it's that's inspiring, and I think if we can just continue that, then that is something hopeful to look forward to for our Tamariki and our Mokopuna, and I think the future we're creating. So just cool. Cool being a part of this kaupapa, and yeah, e mihi ana.
E mihi kau atu mai te tau wharewharenga o tōku ngā kau me tō tātou kaupapa parakore anō hoki. Ka tino koa kare kore ka koa ngā mātua tūpuna ki a kōrua me o kōrua āhuatanga katoa, te whakaaro nui ki ngā tamariki Mokopuna, me te ātāhua hoki o tō kōrua kawe I ngā āhuatanga. Yeah, the kaupapa was Popoiā, te kākano, ana ka hoki au ki ngā kupu ati toko waru, he kākano I rui mai I rangi Atea e kore e ngaro. And that's what, ko tātou anō hoki era kākano, te hunga ora, te hunga tangata, ka pēhea tātou poi o tātou hua, o tātou tamariki Mokopuna, hei painga mō anamata. Definitely love the thought that's still running through my mind, Jared, of what you shared with the fact that we don't inherit this land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And it also takes me back to Tāmoko's whakaaro about the personal responsibility and pepe ha. And so one beautiful thing that I learned from Kui Katerina Te Hei Kōko Mataira was that ha, io, the first ha from io sends that out, and that creates the tukupu, and tukupu is the universe. So that pepe ha connection of ours is universal, but also thinking of the breath of life of our babies and our ancestors and our loved ones, that ha that's all around us, that mobilizes us, and from within and without. From outside. Anyway, yeah, tērā momo āhuatanga. E kore mutu ngā mihi kia kōrua. Anō hoki koutou katoa, anō hoki koe kāwiti, inspire me all the time. And a lot of you on here, it's a real blessing that you've linked in here, because when I did see all the names, I thought, heka, he ohu tātou, he hunga toa Taiao tātou, me kaha tō tātou, kawe ngā mahi, hei painga mō ngā Mokopuna. Nā reira ka kati tēnei hui ki tētahi karakia. And just so everyone's aware, you're welcome to link out after this karakia, or you can put your camera on and have a cup of tea as we've got another session coming up at 11 o'clock. about kope toitu, which is really exciting, about our babies, reusable kope in kohanga, in homes, and changing that action. So we'll leave that for Ngākau to talk about. Whānau, tēnā tātou katoa, thank you so much for your time and your energy that you have shared into this space. Nā reira kia hihiri mai tātou, unuhia I te uru tapu nui a tāne, kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te wairua, te tinana I te arataka tū, hoi ara e rongo, whakairi ake ki runga. Rire hau, pai marire.